Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Baseball Discourse. I am Dan Lovallo. On September the 9th, 2023, in between games of a doubleheader involving the Hartford Yard Goats and the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, I caught up with professional scout Phil Rossi. He is a scout with the Miami Marlins, and we got into what it's like to be a scout. We looked at some of what his history is as a scout. We talked about his friendship with Ted Williams, and I thought I would replay this interview for you on my YouTube channel, Baseball Discourse. So here is my interview with Phil Rossi. Enjoy. We are pleased to be joined by Phil Rossi. Phil is a professional scout with the Miami Marlins. And Phil, first of all, welcome to Duncan Park.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. It's my first trip here, and I'm really excited about being here. The ballpark is beautiful. So a little mini Major League Stadium.
When we say professional scout, what does that mean?
I'm responsible for pro scouting only, anybody that's signed to a contract, minor leagues. So we're responsible for any player that we get assigned team coverage to. This year I'm doing more divisional scouting in the NL East, which brings me to a lot of different places. So Phillies, Nationals, Mets. I went through our minor league system for the first time this year, and I found it a very rewarding experience.
Phil, you've spent a life in baseball. How about giving our audience some background?
Well, I actually got into the scouting after trying to get back into it as a player, not realizing that the Boston Red Sox allowed their retiring scouts to pick their replacements. Charlie Wagner, who was Ted Williams' roommate back in the old Red Sox days, he was my mentor and the one responsible for getting me started in the profession. And a little background, a former Cub minor league player, Millersville University for college, and played the regular leagues, Legion, summer college ball with the Scranton Red Sox in the ACBL. So it's just a typical background of baseball, and just really fortunate and lucky to be able to stay in it.
How has scouting changed since you got into the profession?
I get that question an awful lot. I don't think the actual game has changed. And you have to adjust. I mean, there is a time where, there's a transfer between, like now, present day with the analytics. That's a big part of it, which we have a really nice blend with our analytical staff in Miami. We get a lot of really good information from them in our program, and we use it accordingly when we're doing our scouting as well.
Isn't it amazing how technology certainly has brought about all of these analytics and the changes from that perspective?
It really is. I have to hats off to our people in Miami. The ammunition that they give us to complete reports and look between analytical data and video that's attached to the analytical data, it makes it really, really comfortable to get along with it.
And people might not realize, but there is video everywhere now because every game, every minor league game is televised, correct?
It is, and we have an extensive video program. If I wanted to see anybody, like say Bryce Harper, his whatever home runs he's hitting, I could click on his home run data, and I can get the video of every home run he's hit up to date, and it's extensive throughout the whole program, which is hats off to our guys in Miami.
I want to get back to Ted Williams for just a moment because you knew Ted Williams, didn't you?
I did, and it was through Charlie. They were very dear friends. They played together in the Red Sox organization from the time they were young guys, and their relationship continued on and on through every day and every season past when they even played. They spoke with each other constantly, and they were tremendous friends. So it was through Charlie that I was able to get a chance to meet Ted.
Well, what was it like to get to know Ted Williams? So I happen to think, I even read his book, The Science of Hitting. It didn't help me at all, but I read his book. What was it like to know Ted Williams?
I'm telling you, it was an experience of a lifetime because to be able to get a chance to meet somebody with the impact that he had, and probably the greatest hitter that ever lived, that was ever on the planet, and to get to know him on a personal level was quite rewarding, and something I'll never forget, as a baseball person.
And Phil, you think about it, not only baseball, he served his country in two wars, World War II and the Korean War.
He did. He was just a phenomenal guy, and everything that he anything you can imagine that he represented, he did. And he was just a treat to be around, especially if you had the opportunity. It was like far and few between, but we would actually, Charlie and I would go to Philadelphia, Valley Forge, and watch Ted sign autographs at card shows that a guy from Villanova, Larry Schenk, would put together, and we'd sit there and watch Ted watch. Unbelievable! It was amazing the things that people brought in that he was on. Time Magazine, baseball cards, bats, uniforms, hats. It was just amazing to see him sign all that memorabilia.
Talking with Phil Rossi, a professional scout with the Miami Marlins. When you go out and scout, do you scout a professional player differently than an amateur player?
It depends on the level you're at. If you're doing amateur scouting, you're really looking in the distance. It's a 3 to 5 year range that you're trying to project the player to be. And then as you graduate into the pro scouting, the lower levels, you're still projecting. You're still seeing players that still have ceiling, chance to get better, consistent. So as they get closer even to the big leagues, there's some players that are still learning to play on the job. So it's always a challenge to try to put the pieces together and put that player together and say, what exactly is this guy? What is his profile? How is he going to help your club? Is he a good piece for your roster construction? So it's always a challenge, no matter what, when you go out to see a player, always.
You and I were chatting the other day about mutual scouts that we knew and the stories that they've had over the years, and they've had some favorite ones. Do you have a favorite story as a scout?
Wow, that's a good question, Dan. I mean, I could the one we talked about the other day was the first time Jack Hyatt, my old manager and former Giant catcher, meeting Ted at a baseball school in Florida at Bucky Dent's school. And he was able to meet Jack for the first time and vice versa. Like Jack, it was his favorite player growing up in Bakersfield, California. And Jack had played many, many years in the big leagues and had never met Ted Williams. And Ted actually showed up at the field, and Jack had a chance to meet him. So that was one of my favorite days that I could think of.
It takes a certain makeup to be a scout, among them being you've got to travel all over. Do you have an idea how many miles you travel in the course of a season?
I really think when I was doing the amateur scouting, I had like an 8-state area, and the travel each year was anywhere between like 35 and 50,000 miles in the car on an annual basis. I did that for 25 years. If the best player was in Buffalo, that's where you're at. If he was in Philadelphia the next day, that's where you're at. So, yeah, it was quite extensive. And to get that feeling that is the next guy I'm going to see, is he going to be the guy that's going to be your major league player? And my goal was always to try to sign a Hall of Famer. And I was really lucky in my career. I had not signed a Hall of Famer, but had a chance to see a few. Mike Messina, Craig Biggio. I even thought like a player like Mark Teixeira when he was in high school. He was one of my picks. I thought, man, if I get this guy, I might have a Hall of Famer. And he came close. Mark was a really good player, and had he not had a few more extra injuries, I think he would have been really considered. So Delino DeShields was a player that I saw in the Sandlots that I thought would be a Hall of Famer. Really athletic, and it was really kind of neat to see those guys play like on high school fields growing up.
We hear the story back in the day with the old scouts trying to perhaps hide a prospect from another scout. Is that possible in this day and age with, as we talked about before, all the video and the technology that's out there?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think you have any idea sometimes when you walk into a ballpark if the guy you're watching next is going to be the guy that nobody knows about. But I still think that type of scouting is still out there, because if you watch the draft every year, a lot of the players that are still drafted in the lower rounds are able to put a really good profile together and play in the big leagues before a lot of guys that they know about. So, yeah, I think there's still that possibility that you can go to a Sandlot or Cape Cod League or a Summer College League game or a Legion game and see that one guy that you might nobody else knows about.
Final question, is it fair to say that even with all of this technology, it still comes down to your eyes when it comes to scouting a player?
I appreciate you saying that, because like the eyeball in the game, I think is part of the heartbeat that you can see within the player, and to see the player live and to actually get to watch him move around and see his actions live versus just watching him on a video is really, really important. I found if you're doing video scouting, if you've already seen the player live, it makes the video scouting a little bit easier because you already have a pretty good feel for what the guy can do athletically.
And I'll toss in one more because I believe there should be a wing in the Baseball Hall of Fame for scouts. What say you?
I'm not sure they'd be actually able to do that with some of the many scouts that I've met over the years, and we had quite a staff when I was with the Boston Red Sox. We had scouts that had signed every player back to the 1950s. We had George Digby. We had Joe Stevenson on the West Coast, Chuck Coney. We had Ray Boone. It was an all-star, and I'm sorry I'm missing a few of the other names. Bill Enos up here in the New England area, and Chuck Coney in the Midwest. It was Danny Doyle that signed Roger Clemens. It was just an all-star staff, and they would probably have to fight to see which one of those guys. Plus, you have 29 other teams. Started my career with a lot of really quality veteran baseball guys that could certainly be considered in the Hall of Fame. I wish it would happen, but I don't know. There'd be too many scouts in the Hall of Fame.
Nothing wrong with that. Phil, thanks so much for spending some time with us, and enjoy the rest of your stay here in Hartford.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me on.